Welcome to another watercolor tutorial, everybody. Today I'll be showing you how to paint these two watermelon bookmarks. A special thank you to my fiance who is modeling them for me. But if you want to check out any of these other bookmark tutorials, the links for them will be in the description, so make sure you check them out. Let's get started though. So the first thing you want to do is take a piece of watercolor paper and just cut it into the size of a bookmark. And taping the edges is completely optional, but I like to do so simply because it allows for this really clean and crisp look once you're finished your painting. So what you're going to do is take lime green watercolor mixed with water and paint on the shapes of your watermelons. So obviously we're painting the actual melons and not the slices. That will be the second bookmark. And while that layer is still wet, you want to make sure to take a slightly darker green color and paint on the lines of the watermelon, because of course in a normal watermelon you have these darker lines that span from one end to the other lengthwise, so you just want to replicate that effect. And you can sort of dab those lines simply to create more of a realistic effect. It will allow the lines to bleed into the surrounding paint, which will just make the watermelon look more realistic. What you want to do is, while the paint is still wet, you want to just keep adding more and more layers on top of those initial darker lines that you painted. And with each layer, you want to make it a little bit darker every time. So you can either do that if you have a variety of green pigments, you can use the darker greens, or you can simply mix a little bit of black as you apply more and more layers. If you find that your initial layers have completely dried, that's completely okay. You can just reactivate the paint by painting over the watermelon shape with water and then replicating that exact same process. You want to make sure that you're doing that dabbing motion though, primarily more in the center of your lines rather than towards the edges, to let that paint bleed and just create a more realistic watermelon effect. Make sure you don't add too much black at the beginning, because again you want to layer those layers, and just add a little bit more black with each layer. You can paint as many layers until you feel satisfied with the effect. And actually at the very end, once your watermelon has completely dried, you can add one final layer. This time we're using the wet on dry technique, and this will prevent the paint from dispersing and spreading, and it won't really fade that much, so you'll still have quite a dramatic contrast between the lines of the watermelon. So moving on to the second one, we're going to be painting watermelon slices on this bookmark. So again, I've taped the edges of my bookmark because I like the really clean and crisp look. So what you want to do is take a little bit of water mixed with a tiny bit of this salmon pink color. I would even say it's sort of a pink in between a red color. And you're going to basically paint on the outline of your slice. You can either make them small so the whole slice fits on your bookmark, or you can sort of chop off the edges of some of the slices. I like that look because it makes it a lot more, I don't know, to me it looks a little bit more realistic, but you can of course do whatever you'd like. You can add a little bit more pigment. Again, it has to be wet. That initial layer has to be wet. So as you're layering more pigment, try to be as loose as you can with your strokes and allow the paint to naturally spread rather than you forcing it to go in certain places. This will just make the watermelon look a lot more realistic. You of course want to add the rind of the watermelon, so you can do that by adding lime green and allowing that lime green to fade into the salmon pink color, even leaving a little bit of white in between. And then you can also add a darker outline on the edge of that lime green mixed with a little bit of those dots to insinuate the lines of a watermelon that run across lengthwise. And you can continue building more and more layers until you are essentially satisfied with how your watermelon looks. But you want them to be very blotchy, because if you look at a cut watermelon, the slices do look blotchy. They're not all evenly pink or red in the same spot. And that's about it. Thank you so much for watching my tutorial, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and check out some of my other bookmark tutorials.